Let's get ready to rumble!
I like both of them.
If that's the debate, then that's what I said. That is not the debate topic.
Race cars.
It would be an interesting debate topic.
I've never had that.
I don't think I've ever had them, but I just like them.
All right. Now, anybody here ever actually been to a classical, like, actual debate?
No, I know.
We just did one in English.
Like an actual You what?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So here's a secret. Actually, it's not much of a secret. What we see every 4 years in the presidential debate, that is not an actual debate. That's just two old men throwing things at each other and speaking incomprehensibly. Okay. An actual debate is timed. There are rules. Okay.
This sounds boring.
Fair. Now.
There are no weapons.
I like when the old men.
So that's what we should do. Instead of just having a lecture, take the two old men, put them in a ring, put like one knife or like a broken pool stick in between them, and be like, figure it out.
That broken bull stick is a superior weapon.
Just like in Dark Knight. We're gonna have tryouts. Right? So
Try out to be the president. I like it.
this does not go on Instagram, right? All right. So here's the deal.
YouTube.
In an actual formal debate, okay. In an actual formal debate, usually they're over yes or no questions. Okay, yes or no side. Now the topic of this debate is what?
God versus no God.
Okay, yeah. Is it reasonable to believe in the existence of God? Now, traditionally, the side that answers yes to that question gets to go first. Okay, whatever the question is. The yes side gets to go first. The no side gets sort of the final word by tradition. Okay, I'm a very traditional person. So, I'm going to allow this side, however you decide you want to do it, okay, to go ahead and make your opening statements as to the reasonableness of faith in God in general and in Christianity in particular. Okay? Go. By the way, usually it's timed. They'll have like 20 minutes to make a statement. Okay? I'm not going to time it. I'm just going to let them take as much time as I think they need, and then I'll respond. Continue. Hold on. Hold on. Let me get my,
Spit facts on that.
He's gonna spit the facts. What do you think? How's this gonna turn out, Michael?
How's video?
Yeah.
Jerome spits facts on Papa's head. Cops called. Not funny.
Yeah.
Smash the like button.
Subscribe.
Add this video to your favorites.
Got it. Anybody else got any final words? Yeah. That's gonna be a classic.
All right, listen up. Your time begins now.
Okay. I would like to open up this debate with a quote from the Bible. This comes from Jeremiah 31 through 33. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel. After this time, declares the Lord, I will put my law in their hearts and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. So
That is how everybody has the same. That's how most societies have the same like moral truths that are on there because it's put in our hearts by God, which is one of the things that points to the existence of a God. And the other things that point to the existence of a God is how many of the things in the world are designed, or seem to be designed at least, because and are very precise in how they need to function, such as like where the Earth sits in the solar system is not something that would be able to be by random chance, and the beginning of life on Earth is something that's very complicated, and most scientists don't have a clear answer to, or the beginning of the universe, where with Christianity you do.
taking that in a different approach, I would like to make this clear that we cannot conceive of God. We cannot understand God because we are not God. God created us, therefore we cannot understand him. God does not exist in time, space, matter of a mass. But he has given us the law that we know. He has put it in our hearts and he has put it in our minds. Therefore, we can understand through Jesus coming to earth that Christ is real. Through God sending his son here, we can understand that God is real. Simon, do you have anything to add?
No.
I think they'll open up our debate.
Okay. So the way this is going to work is I will have a chance to make a statement, okay? And then you will have a chance to rebut. It's one of those words that sounds dirty but isn't, Gary.
It's funny because there's butt in it.
This is why the presidential debates are the way they are. Because not like you watch them.
I never watch presidential debates.
There you go. Yeah, I know. So at this point, the opposition makes a statement. You are given a chance to offer a rebuttal. I am given a chance to offer a rebuttal to your rebuttal, okay? And then typically there's like a Q&A from the audience.
Can they rebuttal?
No. No, there's four. Typically there's four set times of speaking, okay? There's no speaking over each other, okay? There's a timekeeper and everything typically. So that's how that works. All right, so you started off. Sorry, I do better with a podium. You don't have a podium. Sorry.
He's got a stick.
I know. All right, so you started off with a quote from the Bible, which is kind of a bold choice. What is your basis? I see no reason for you to have a basis of claiming the Bible as any sort of epistemological source of knowledge. Right? And the reason I say that I say there's no epistemological certainty when it comes to Scripture is because the first thing you point to is moral truths. Your claim, my opposition claimed that there were same specific moral truths that were endemic to each society, and those moral truths come from God. Now, I would venture to guess that my opponents believe that it is a moral truth that you shouldn't murder. Then how do you, and that moral truth comes from God, then how do you explain all the ancient cultures that engage in ritualistic human sacrifice to appease their gods? Sounds to me like it isn't the same moral truth. You have differing moral truths, and the moral truth of Christianity just happened to be the one that won out, in the Western Hemisphere. You also say that the universe seems to be designed, right? It's precise. It needs to be there. I see no epistemological, certainly no metaphysical imperative that would say the universe needs to be here or needs to behave in any sort of certain way. To me, it would be just easier to say the universe has always been here. It's always been this way. There's also no basis to believe this isn't the only universe out there. There could be, for all we know, as we see it. You okay?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just put hand sanitizer
Oh. I'm sure you're aware of the theory that says that there is the multiverse theory that says there's multiple universes being generated all the time, and who knows if we are not the ones that just happen to exist in one of the inhabitable universes that can sustain life. You also say that the universe cannot be the result of random chance because it seems to have been so intricately designed. Now, as a proud atheist, I believe that the universe is eternal. I don't think that you need to make the case that the universe has a beginning. I don't think that case is even necessary to make. I think it's a bold claim that's without necessity. And if the universe is eternal, then by definition, that you would have an unlimited number of times to get that right. The same sort of argument that we're to say if I were to put a monkey in front of a typewriter, eventually that monkey would type out the transcript to War and Peace, given an unlimited amount of time. So I don't think I don't think that the argument that says we're not the result of random chance is a particularly compelling one. You also say that you can't conceive of God, right? What you've just done there is you've just given me a thesis that's unfalsifiable. How can you give me a theory and put it forward as true if it is literally, by definition, impossible for me to prove your theory false? You're trying to get me to use the rules of evidence to prove that a being that exists outside the rules of evidence doesn't exist. That's an impossible task. Now, every other, what do I want to say? Sorry, it's 7th hour, my brain's not working. Every other discipline, right? Every other artistic discipline, scientific discipline, philosophical discipline will say that in order for you to make the case that your belief is true, that belief needs to be falsifiable in some way. There needs to be something that if we encountered that would prove your theory false. But you're trying to exempt yourself from that. You're trying to say that the rules of evidence, the observable rules of evidence that we can see, are not capable of proving our theory false. Well, no, duh. Because your theory is that this being exists outside the rules of physics. So how can physics disprove your theory? You've made a completely unfalsifiable claim, and that is actually a point against your theory being true. Rebut.
Are you done? Oh, okay. So, I need
Oh, he's busting out the LaCroix.
Smoke with yeah.
So let's start with your first point. And this is based on us saying that moral truths are not quantifiable because we are sinful beings. That is what I have to say, is that we are sinful beings. No, duh, do we make mistakes? Because that is the truth that God lays on us. Of course we're making mistakes. Why would Christ have to come down to heaven if we didn't make mistakes?
Okay, so, and you also claim that the universe is eternal. This is by the science that you almost worship, the science that you completely support through and through, that this is not true. Because the way that energy works in the universe is that every form of energy eventually goes down into less and less useful forms. So the least useful form is heat. So, because everything in the universe is being turned into heat, which is a useless energy, eventually all of the energy in the universe would be just heat, and then eventually all that heat would be gone. So, by your definition, if the universe was eternal and doesn't have a beginning, then there would be no universe right now, or at least no energy in the universe, and we all know that there's energy in the universe because there's things like the sun and us and everything really that is alive. You also talked about the multiverse, which is interesting because you try to criticize us by saying there's not enough evidence from us for a God, when you make a claim towards the multiverse, which has zero evidence. There is not anything supporting the multiverse at all. It is just an idea that people came up with because there's no scientific backing to it. It's just an idea. And finally, you talked about how our claim cannot be true because science can't prove it true. Everything does not need to be proved by science. Science is just a method of determining things in the physical world. So, and trying to say that something cannot be true because it can't be proved by science is just scientism, not science. So, that means that our debate for God can still be true even if it doesn't go with your rules of how truth needs to be determined.
I also would like to point out that you talked about a monkey in front of a typewriter. And if we gave that monkey infinite amount of possibilities, then at some point it would write what we have today, what following events that we have. So how do you explain to me that in one chance that the Old Testament that we follow in our belief, that we can identify is historical truth, that Jesus Christ could have passed all of those prophecies that the Old Testament leaders pointed out before he was even thought of? a statistical number that we could look up, but is most likely of quantifiable truth, that we could say that it is a 1 in a millionth % chance that Christ could have done all of the things that the Old Testament, what's the word I'm looking for? Prophesied, sure, yes.
It would definitely be much higher than 1 in a million. But the point still stands. And there's quantifiable evidence that, because you may claim, oh, well, it was all written at the same time then, or things like that, but we have old transcripts from very long ago that prove that it was not just something that was all written at the same time, it was all written at different times.
Your rebuttal.
So in talking about moral truth, my opponents, they make an appeal to the concept of sin. Now, I'll ignore, out of pure kindness, I will ignore the fact that they are begging the question when it comes to the definition of sin. They seem to think they have the sole dictionary when it comes to that sort of thing. But when they started giving their first statement, they were talking strictly about natural law and natural theology. They made the precise claim that because the law of their God was written on their heart, you saw the same sort of moral code in all cultures, whether they were Christian or Jewish or what have you. I blew a hole in that theory by pointing out that there were multiple cultures who engaged in practices for religious purposes that contradict the Judeo-Christian moral code. Their response to this was to bring Jesus into it. Okay? Last time I checked, Jesus is not an aspect of natural revelation or natural law, but revealed knowledge, revelation. So my question is, why are they trying to rebut my claims about revealed law, revealed morality, using the specific revelation of Jesus found in the New Testament? It's apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. Now, talking about things like, the laws of physics and heat being the most useless, the most useless form of energy, what have you, that's all well and good. But at the same time, they put it upon science to prove God true. That's not what I said. I said that science is incapable of proving the idea of God false. The problem with their theory is not that it might be true or not true. The problem with their theory is that it is unfalsifiable. It's impossible, by definition, for the laws of physics to prove that a certain non-physical being does not exist. For instance, by way of an example, if you would indulge me in a certain amount of absurdity, it is impossible, I would say, to prove that unicorns do not exist. It's impossible. You can't do it. Because in order to prove that through the scientific method would require you to base your analysis on your observation. You can't observe a negative. You can't do it. Right? So their thesis that science can't observe God, therefore God, they're just continuing with their unfalsifiable thesis. They're also engaging in what's called the God of the gaps theory. They say, well, science can't explain X, therefore God. I'm not sure you can justify making that logical leap. Finally, they make the case that Jesus lends credence to their claim of the existence of God because he fulfills the Old Testament prophecies. My question is if that's true, why didn't the first century Jews see it that way? Jesus' own disciples did not expect him to rise from the dead. So what is there in the Old Testament that clearly teaches that Christ is going to do these things when his own people did not recognize him as the Messiah? Apparently there's a bit of a disconnect there. Your time.
So can we not sympathize with the disciples and all of the early Jews that trying to understand?
No way.
So can we not sympathize?
Preach it, Dr. King.
Oh, my goodness.
Seriously though, it's hard to understand it's hard to comprehend what Jesus did, to die on the cross and then resurrect 3 days later. We can't do it. Raising Lazarus from the dead, we can't understand it. And that's the miracle of God's ability beyond us. And that is a truth that is hard to comprehend. Only through historical truth can we prove that Jesus died and rose again. And with all of the absurdities of Jesus, magically going away or being able to lie, I mean, you could say after Jesus resurrected, why would his disciples go through awful deaths to, instead of just saying, I don't believe in Christ. I don't believe that Christ died.
They wouldn't do that for something that wasn't real.
They wouldn't do that for something that wasn't true.
That was made up. They would have had to have known it was made up because they were the ones who were testifying to it being so real. I'm not so still, I'm still saying
I tried my best.
it's okay.
Nuts. Oh, here we go. Another problem I had with your argument was the laws that you have. I mean, at this point, we have different laws of understanding when it comes to physical understanding of the world. Putting you through the gap loop, you called it?
God of the gaps.
God of the gaps. There we go.
We do not say that God just fills in all of the gaps in our science. We might have done that in medieval times, but anymore we know when to say we don't know. But even though we don't use God to fill in all the gaps, many evolutionists and people who don't believe in a God use science that they've made up to try to fill in those gaps and say, oh, well, it's science, so it's okay. It doesn't matter that I've created this theory that has no good basis, such as the Big Bang of two nothings create a something, or just really nothing can make something, which is it's impossible. From every idea of how to think of it, there's no situation that would make sense. So,
I mean, she's right though. In your understanding, you can't have two nothings make something. But through our understanding, Christ, God the Father, can make something because he is that something. He is the one that makes everything.
He's always been there. He doesn't have to stick to our rules of science like the Earth having always existed, or not the Earth, but the universe having always existed would have to stick to. Because you kind of just brushed off my science that I had, but it's fine.
But that doesn't mean that God
use your
doesn't.
own science and then ignore mine. But this God does not need to fit into the rules of science where your universe does. So you say that we're putting you in a spot where you're unable to prove that there is no God. And while you can't prove that something doesn't exist, there is evidence for it. If there was unicorns, there would be evidence of unicorns. There's evidence of God. It may not be seeing God, like seeing a unicorn, but if we found something to prove a unicorn, if we found, let's say, ancient historical records that were very reliable and showed that unicorns did at one point walk the earth, then we would say, hey, unicorns exist.
I would also like to bring up our first argument, if you don't mind.
Please.
Romans 2.
I got nowhere to go.
15 says that they show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consequences also being witnessed, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, at other times even defending them.
So I'm going to hell, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you always have to.
Guys, just took the collar off. It's okay.
Oh God.
Finished?
Sure.
Okay. So I hate to dwell in absurdity, but since that's your word, not mine.
Where did I start?
As long sorry, your word, talking about the absurdities of Christ's supposed actions in the New Testament. Actually, there is an ancient document, by the way, that does bear witness to the existence of unicorns. Your Bible, the King James Version, book of Genesis, chapter 9, talking about the animals that were on the ark, describes unicorns being on the ark. Okay? So if your Bible is going to describe the complete absurdity of these unicorn creatures being on the ark, I'm wondering how you can possibly, it's in the original King James, I'm not sure it's in the 1611, how you can possibly argue for things like the resurrection, or things that frankly are even more absurd than the existence of unicorns. Finally, you seem to argue that everything you make the this is the final argument I'll make, and then we'll release it to the audience out here. People like Ike, I'll make him ask a question.
I've got lots of questions.
You seem to be of the sort of Platonic or Aristotelian metaphysical persuasion that says that everything that we see requires some sort of explanation or some sort of source. We require a source, the desk requires a source, the school requires a source. Who made God? Why would you arbitrarily stop at God and say there's nothing beyond this God that you supposedly believe in? If everything requires a source, then it seems to me that if you're going to stop at God, that's very arbitrary, and you don't have a good reason for doing so. At this time, we will go ahead and open it up to the, no, you're not fired yet. We will go ahead and open it up to the peanut gallery out there. And who are the alternates? Okay, you are going to be the first question askers. Okay. The questions can be addressed to either party. That's fine.
Who's going first? Am I going first?
Yeah, just ask a question. Yep.
Okay. So first I want to say something about their statement. So
Is that a
Taylor's
question? Is that a question?
No, it's just I'm saying.
Well, he said questions were open to the peanut gallery, not statements.
I'm working on it.
All right. Are you prefacing your question with a
Yes,
statement?
I'm
Okay.
prefacing my question.
There you go. Continue.
So when Taylor said that we don't have any evidence of unicorns, so you can't believe that there were unicorns, saying something like that is like taking a spoonful of water out of the ocean and not believing that there's sharks in the ocean because there's no sharks in your spoon.
Okay.
So there could be unicorns that exist. The word exist is very broad. Now exist on Earth is something else. But exist is a big statement. However, is there a quantifiable means of telling yourself how many stars there are in the sky?
Well, the quantifiable means, by definition, would strictly be limited to means of observation, right? So I would say there are as many stars in the sky as we can observe at any given time, right? That we know of. Now, there's certainly the potential for stars in the sky. In fact, there's the certainty of stars in the sky that we can't observe. But that's not a limit of human knowledge. That's not a sort of metaphysical category. That's just strictly speaking, that's a limit of technology. Hypothetically, if we had the technology to peer deeper into the universe, we could see more stars.
All right, so you're talking about the existence of potentially existing stars and things we can't observe. So how does your statement about their unfalsifiable claim that God exists but we can't observe him or quantify him work with your statement of not being able to observe or quantify all the stars in the sky?
Well, strictly because I can observe other stars. if I can observe other stars, and I know that there exist other galaxies beyond this galaxy, then I have reason to believe that other stars exist. I haven't observed a God. So if I had observed a God, then maybe I would be led to believe that other deities exist, but those things can't be observed, right?
So your basis statement there, you used a really fun word named believe, or the word believe. So using the word believe, using the word believe, what has inspired you to believe the statements that you have produced?
Everything I believe comes from empirical science, comes from data. Science is the only way that we can possibly arrive at a knowledge of the truth, because it's the only way that we can actually test hypotheses and test theories. The theory of God is a theory that by definition cannot be tested, therefore it's unfalsifiable, therefore it is a bad theory.
So you're saying...
By the way, this is your final question, then we're going to move on.
So you're saying that based off of your ability to use science to produce answers to certain questions, things such as the multiverse, which are not scientifically proven in any way, have no basis in reality, are able to be proved by a science that doesn't exist.
Well, there's the well, first of all, there's what's proven, and then there's what's reasonable. Okay. Now, I'm honest enough to know that even if something hasn't been proven, doesn't make it not reasonable. I'm saying that the hypothesis of God is neither proven nor is it reasonable. Yes.
What's your definition of multiverse?
What's that?
What's your definition of, as an atheist definition?
Have you seen that Family Guy episode?
No,
There you go. Next question.
What? Oh, I get it. Well, okay.
Yes, sir.
When you were talking to Gabe, you talked about like stars, and you said even though we don't have the technology to see like deeper into space, those stars, like we know that they're there because we can see the stars that are already there, right? Isn't that kind of the same thing with created? Because everything is created around us. So wouldn't
I'm not
we
sure.
assume
I'm not
that
sure of the question.
it's created?
See, but
Wouldn't we assume
you've slid the word created in there, which automatically assumes a creator. I'm not sure that you can do that.
Okay, but if we can assume there's stars
Yeah.
that we don't have evidence for, because they're
Well,
other
it's not that we
stars.
don't have evidence for. I
What?
mean, we have evidence of them in terms of we know the other galaxies are out there. We know the universe is expanding, and we see other stars. Therefore, therefore it's reasonable that other stars exist.
So if everything's created, wouldn't it be reasonable if everything that we experience is created, like the desks and the grass, like it comes from something else? Wouldn't it be reasonable to assume that we're created as well?
Well, I mean, if you're going to make that argument, then you arrive at the same problem that I finished with, is if you're going to trace everything back to an origin that came before it, what would be your reason, philosophically or scientifically or metaphysically, what would be your reason for arbitrarily stopping at the Christian concept of God? What is there to say there's not something beyond that God or beyond that God? Where does it stop? Stopping it with God seems very arbitrary to me. Yeah.
At the beginning of the argument, you said
Why are all the questions directed at me, by the way? Sorry, continue.
Because we're all trying to help them.
But if you ask us questions, then we can defend things too.
Just make sure we'll be.
Fine, I'll see you guys. No, I'm sorry, that's for sure, actually. But at the beginning of the argument, the whole purpose of this entire argument, the thesis was to defend our reasonability and our faith. We didn't have to prove the existence of God. We didn't have to prove the reasonability of God. We had to prove the reasonability of our faith. So, from the perspective of an atheist, would you rather? Well, is it more reasonable to you? Is it more reasonable to you to live and die a life where your life means nothing, or to believe in something bigger than yourself and die where you are a part of something bigger, where you have a chance at eternal life? Which is more reasonable to you?
Well, see, what you're describing isn't a matter of reason. It's a matter of emotion. It's a matter of wishful thinking, frankly. Okay. When we're talking about things that are reasonable, as I see it, there are two things that make a theory plausible. It has to be, as I said, falsifiable. Okay. Meaning it has to be able to be measured positively by scientific evidence, and it has to be simple. It has to be the least complex version of that theory. Okay. The more complex the theory is, then the less likely that theory is to be true. And the way I see it, the theory of the existence of a God is neither. All right, it's neither falsifiable, it can't be disproven by modern science, and it's also complex because it's a theory that tries to explain everything. And we go back to the God of the gaps argument. Everything that can't be explained by science is explained by God. It tries to. It's an argument that tries to prove too much. Continue. Yes. Yeah.
You guys talked about morals, so can you explain to us how the common morals works towards your reasoning that God exists?
Us?
Yeah, you.
Well, I'll just have to say that the law is written. Why does everybody laugh when
Because
I
it's the way you say it. You're, well, I'm just gonna have to
I
show
think
it
you have
off.
a future in the ministry.
Yeah.
Or as a philosophy professor.
What was I even saying?
The
I don't
law
know.
is written.
The laws written in our hearts prove that there's something or some matter that helps us, if it was either created or just evolutionized over thousands of years, that makes us decide our every decision, whether right or wrong. But where does it come from? He might say evolution, he might say that through a matter of a million galaxies, there might be one that says, oh, we actually understand what we're doing wrong, instead of a duck that knows everything, and we have duck people walking around.
Fun fact: everything in the universe is either a duck
Or
not
or not a duck. Boom, roasted.
So, understanding our existence has the matter of understanding the decisions that we make on a daily basis.
So,
And, okay,
have
go
you
ahead.
explained that he brought up that some cultures don't have those morals and would do human sacrifice? How do you explain that?
Well, what's the result of having no morals? It's death. It's destruction. Everything that God doesn't want in our lives. Everything that points to sin. So without Christ, there is death here, also in spiritual
So
death.
are you saying that Christ isn't with those people?
That is what I'm saying, yes.
They've rejected Christ at that point, and they've taken those things.
So then God's not everywhere. So he's
God
not
is
omniscient, he's not
everywhere.
omnipresent, therefore he's not God.
That is not-
Sorry, Kaylee's had her hand up.
I just wanted to.
You're not allowed to say things to us, are you?
I'm the teacher, I go.
Teacher
Much
right now.
like your God, I can break the rules there. Continue.
Okay, one, death is inevitable, so you can't really say, like that is, you can say that it's a result from sin, but you can't say it's a result of not having morals, because people with morals will still die. And I have a question for Simon.
What?
I'm sorry, I have a question for Simon.
Oh, boy.
What makes our religion, like, or not our religion, what makes Christianity different from other people's religions? Like, what makes it more true? Because we are taught from ancient doctrines just as they are, and they believe it just as we do. So what makes it different?
There's been evidence, for example, as has been mentioned prior, the prophecies of Jesus, and as Pastor said, that who? As atheists said.
Father Atheist.
That is, or it might have been Ben said that it's very unlikely for those circumstances to occur. However, perhaps we are in a reality that just happened to have the exact circumstances required for Jesus to have fulfilled all of those prophecies. However, if we're believing in the multiverse, in which there are infinite number of possibilities, then we have to imagine a possible reality in which God does exist. And if he can exist, if a God can exist within a reality and is capable of, if he is capable of existing if a perfect God is capable of existing within this reality, then he would be able and is able to exist outside of space and time, then he would be able to exist outside of this reality, and therefore in all other realities.
Okay. Reagan, you had some?
How would you respond to his uniform rebuttal?
So you talked about how it's something that has been found in the Bible, and it proves because there is like the 16th version of the King James, when that one is largely known to be not a reliable translation of the Bible. So using that one as your basis for that does not disprove the Bible's authenticity, and does not help prove your statement that unicorns have been found in reliable historical texts. And also, if you're using it as reliable or historical text and you're using the Bible as that, then the Bible, you would have to say that the Bible is a reliable text. But,
Michael.
What is your guys' rebuttal to his statement that other religions have done human sacrifices in the past and they saw that as moral and pleasing to their God?
Well, that's returning to what Reagan had to say earlier. And Rachel, my goodness, I need to learn names better. And I feel like that, well, what was your point, Michael? Sorry, your question?
His point was that other religions have made human sacrifices and murdered to please their God. They believed it was moral for their God. And so, what's your rebuttal to that? You guys just ignored it.
Saying, okay,
Humans can make mistakes.
sure, humans can make mistakes. We are sinful. We did answer that saying that we are
Oopsie, I just sacrificed this guy.
Can you do
I'll do better next
awkward
time.
moment?
Awkward.
Sacrifice your brother.
Sorry, Dave. By the way, I'm totally getting with your wife now.
That's really makes a great atheist.
We'll cover that.
Your laws. We talked about human law and how we can't follow human law. When humans create law, it leads to death. What she was saying is that human law leads to death and that we die, right? That's what we're saying here.
We need like an organ and a gospel choir.
Hallelujah, brothers!
So in God's holy word, we can say that he releases us from this death. It is not correct, Candy, for us to die. God says that we're not supposed to die, that we were supposed to live forever, fraternally, forever in this world. This is supposed to be the perfect world, but due to human sin, we can't exist. Is that correct? We will die eventually.
Yes.
And that's why we need Christ to continue
You
living.
cannot stop dying. I didn't say it's correct. I said it's inevitable.
You still never answered your question.
True.
What law has to do with it?
No.
The law written on our hearts that when man pushes a guy off a cliff, he knows that it's morally wrong. Does he not?
No.
All right, go ahead and take another 30 seconds, then we're going to bring it back in.
If God has written law in our hearts, why did other religions think it was okay to kill people?
Is it okay for other people?
Why did if the law is written on everyone's heart, why did other religions say it's okay to kill other people?
You guys said that we all have the common morals and that proves that God is real, but he said that some cultures have done like human sacrifice, which is against our morals given by God.
That's not all cultures.
So how do you explain that?
So it's really all basis of who
Five.
the difference
Who has rejected
between
God.
Christians and those who are not Christians.
Dose.
And their laws and our laws.
Thanks.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right, go ahead and have a seat. Thank you.
Good job, guys.
What you do that video there, Mark?
It's gonna be a good one. That's all I gotta say. Yeah, that's going on a meme compilation. I got all the footage,
All right,
literally
listen
everything.
up, listen up.
This is a Jordan Meyer production.
Sweet home Alabama.